All right, I'm opting to do another video submission for case study 14. It said in the case study literature that was okay, so I figure I had a fun time with the last one. I want to do the same thing on this one, given that you've given us the opportunity. So AJ, the pharmacist dealing MMA fighter in his early 20s. This case study rings way too true to my heart because I work out of an MMA gym and a boxing gym. And since I've started along this nutrition path, I've started getting solicited there for a lot of various advice from the athletes that work out of those gyms. And I also have been trying actively for a while now to partner with those gyms to help train their athletes from a nutrition perspective for their competitions and fights. That being said, I've encountered a lot of different shapes and sizes of fighters, and this AJ character kind of rings too true to my heart because I've met a few dudes that just kind of resonate exactly with what was described in the case study. Young, kind of has some ego going on, thinks he's got it all together because he's making good money in his early 20s, but might not totally realize that the illegitimacy of said money is ultimately could lead to his demise. Thinks that he's doing okay because he's getting some amateur fights and potentially winning them, but doesn't realize the long-term damage he's doing to his body via the drug intake, the alcohol intake, and the poor nutrition. And then most difficult is these guys generally don't come from a place where it's very easy to approach them. They come from a place where crucial conversations are not frequently had and not met with a lot of positivity. So how do I approach this as his coach? Well, the first things first is safety. Anytime you're dealing with somebody in the shoes of a guy like AJ, you want to make sure you're leveraged to be safe. I don't want to put myself in a position where I could be on the receiving end of it if he ends up not responding to what I have to say very well. So I would choose one of two options. I would either choose to have the conversation via an online platform like Zoom or Skype if he's willing. If he's more of a face-to-face kind of guy, I would suggest we have the conversation right out of the gym because as intimidating as the whole MMA gym idea can be, my experience having rolled through a lot of those gyms is most of them are filled with really good, nice people who just happen to fight for a living and can be animals in the cage or ring, but in their day-to-day life they're good people who don't want any trouble. So that environment actually probably, in my opinion, would be a safe place to have a conversation with a guy like AJ, just because I know if something went wrong there'd probably be plenty of people around who would also know the type of dude AJ is and be prepared to help de-escalate it if things went south. But my goal also in the conversation would to not let it go south. I would want to approach it from a more positive perspective than that and take the assumption that AJ's come to me to grow and therefore might be willing to hear what I have to say. So what am I going to do with this conversation? The motivational interviewing techniques are just gold. I mean, we started studying those in case study 10 heavily, and I mean, I've been running any coaching session I have just basically using the outline that y'all provided for that case study. And I feel like the motivational interviewing would be a perfect scenario for a fighter like AJ because these guys aren't the type of people that are going to respond. I'm using generalizations, but in my experience, these types of guys aren't the type of people who are going to respond very well to being told what to do. The pharmaceutical dealing tough guy from the wrong side of the tracks isn't going to take well to some nutrition coach being like, hey, bro, you need to eat this, and that, and drink more water and cut out drugs. Like that's not going to go well. It needs to come from him. Also, though, as the case study noted, these guys aren't stupid. They're somewhat business savvy. They understand what they're trying to do, what their motivations are to a degree. So it's in them. You just have to figure out how to pull it out of them. So my approach to the conversation would be to use those motivational interviewing techniques. I would start with asking a lot of questions. The two crazy questions: how. What would be good about not changing, and what would be bad about changing. Those questions would be perfect for a guy like AJ because it would help to really get inside of his head to see, how he's feeling about everything. Because another aspect of this, in my experience with some very similar characters, is that although they make good money doing what they do and, they're experiencing, some perceived degree of success, They also, in many cases, are looking to get into that MMA world because, as the case study stated, it offers them an opportunity at legitimacy where they otherwise wouldn't have one. So, they don't always want to be dealing pharmaceuticals, as they're living. A lot of them want out of that world. And this MMA, boxing, jiu-jitsu scene, it gives these guys with minimal education, who don't come from an upbringing that would provide them much opportunity, it gives them an opportunity to do that. So I would kind of take that approach with him in the conversation, and I would use motivational interviewing techniques to guide him into that realization, which I think, from what I'm reading about AJ, is already somewhere inside of him. He already is coming to me because he wants to do better. He wants to go pro. He wants to improve his nutrition. He's already training, even though he might not be going about it the right way. He's putting in the work. I mean, if the guy's showing up to the gym and getting amateur fights and needing to get band-aided up after all these fights, he's clearly willing to put in the work to achieve this goal. So help him to see that. Help him to see that this approach of drugs, alcohol, highs and lows, bipolarity that comes from utilizing these pharmaceuticals isn't really getting him to his goal. So I would use those motivational interviewing techniques without a doubt to approach this conversation. What is my role in this? My role in this is, it's like anything. I'm a coach. I'm there to help him see what it's going to take him to achieve his goals. He's coming to me with a goal, and he's already working towards that goal. So it's not my job to tell him what his goal is. He already clearly knows it. It's my my role to help align him align his behaviors towards his perceived objective or goal. And his behaviors right now are sort of aligned to it, but not really, because he's eating like garbage and essentially killing himself from the inside out with all these pharmaceuticals. So my role as a coach is to help him, through motivational interviewing techniques, recognize that he has a goal, but his behaviors don't align. So what am I going to do to help him take those behaviors and align them to that end goal so that he can get where he wants to be, which is a professional MMA fighter and presumably out of this pharmaceutical dealing world that he's in from the wrong side of the tracks. What emotional response do I expect from a guy like AJ? That honestly could go either way. Like the case study said, he has highs and lows, he has good moods and bad moods. And if we do a scheduled coaching session, really it's going to come down to what mood he is on that day, but I feel like utilizing motivational interviewing techniques and making the answers come from him is going to, in some degree, help to control the emotional response that I get from him, because rather than me telling him what to do and then him responding to it depending on his mood, whatever conclusions we come to will have ultimately come from him through the motivational interviewing techniques. So any adverse emotional response would really be geared towards himself because those answers are coming from him. So that could go either way. But again, going back to my scenario and scene, I would choose to do it either online or in the gym itself in a safe, comfortable environment with other people around, in the office, or, well, maybe not the office, then we'd be alone, but in a space in the gym where we can have a session but still be visible to other folks. I think I've covered most of the points of the case study. I'm reading them as I go through this, but that's Mango, sorry. What might AJ want and need? I think I've already stated that. Like, what does he need? He needs to get out of the scene that he's in, and somewhere inside of him he knows that. And what does he want? He wants to take steps to do that. So that's why he's coming to me, and that's where my job comes in of motivationally interviewing him to show him, the steps that he might be able to take to get there versus the steps he's taking now, which don't necessarily align with that goal. So I hope that this does a good job of summarizing how I would approach that conversation. Again, I've dealt with dudes like AJ before. They are characters, but ultimately, I think a lot of these guys get a bad rap. I think when you come from the wrong side of the tracks and life doesn't throw you the opportunities that it does to some of your peers, you do what you got to do to survive. And as the case study stated, things like MMA, boxing, these give, due to otherwise wouldn't have a chance at legitimacy. But it's not an overnight thing. They're dealing in a lifestyle that they've lived their whole life, that they've come up to be told is the only way they can survive, and now they have this other choice. But you're not going to cut out that one thing instantaneously and replace it with a new thing. So you have to help him to see the process that it's going to take to get there. I'm at 10 minutes, so I'm going to cut it now, and I hope you enjoyed this and have a great day.